I'm really excited to welcome our Stuckeman Lecture Series speaker, Bryony Gomez-Palacio. She is the principal and co-founder of Under Consideration, an Indiana-based graphic design firm that generates projects and content while taking on limited client work. The studio organizes design events, sells products such as design prints, and publishes posts on their current blog entitled Brand New. The blog's bi-weekly podcast, The Follow-Up, discusses the projects reviewed on Brand New and features conversations with the designers and sometimes clients to uncover the context, background, and design decisions behind the work. In 2010, Gomez-Palacio and her husband, Armin Witt, created the Brand New Conference, a 2-day event on corporate and brand identity with some of the most active and influential practitioners from around the world. The event furthers the exchange of knowledge within the design community, taking place in person and online. The 2024 event will take place in October, from October 10th to 11th in Salt Lake City. So without further ado, let's welcome Bryony.
Thank you so much. As you mentioned, our event is coming up in October, and if you're super inspired after all that you see today, we are always open to volunteers, and we give you a really good time. So just let me know. Testing, just making sure the Zoom is working, Jamie?
Yeah, it's good.
Everything's good, so jump right in. Hello, Penn State, how are you doing today?
Good.
Here I don't see anything, here I can see you, but I'm blocking the screen, aren't I? That's not fair. All right, so I'm here to talk to you about making a case against easy. Easy is something that I struggle with a lot because it's usually the path I don't take. But I don't have that many followers, so hopefully I'll have some converts today. But first, let me allow you to give you a little bit of context of where I'm coming from. This is the nickname my family has given, the tumbleweed. I never settled. If there wasn't a camera following me right now, I'd be up and down this path without nonstop. But most of all, it translates to this. I was born and raised in Mexico City. From there, I went to college in Atlanta. From there, I moved to Chicago for my first job as a graphic designer at a design firm. From there, I moved to New York because New York, that's what we wanted to do, right? That was kind of the dream between my husband, also a graphic designer, and myself. But then we had a kid and we fled New York and we moved to Austin. All was great. We love a good college town until everybody discovered Austin and all the large companies started to move in and it got too crazy, and so we decided to move to Google search Bloomington, Indiana, another small college town. We don't have family in the US and we work from home, so we do not have any parameters as to where we get to live. Now, further context, Brand New, as was mentioned, is a blog about branding, and the very essence of it is the before and after of a brand, when it goes through a change, an evolution, a revolution, or when a new brand that matters kind of worldwide or nationwide introduces itself. And so we cover those. We've been covering these since 2006. That's on average 5 brands per day that we post about. So we have about 10,000 reviews at this point. The blog itself has gone through several evolutions since then, 17 years. So it's only fair that we have rebranded and adjusted the layout and made changes based on our audience feedback over the years. 10 days ago, we unveiled our latest and grandest design, and we had a logo made by Rob Clark, and it took us about a year because self-made projects take a long time and we had a lot of interruptions. This is the new layout, and if you haven't been to Brand New, go visit. There's a lot of information there that can guide you through your own projects. So that is the context. Another important moment in our design firm history is 2008 to 2009. The economic recession. At that point, we were in New York, and as I mentioned, there was a kid involved, and all of a sudden, New York was no longer fun. It was very expensive. We were going nowhere because babysitters and all of those things are insane. And we realized we live in a 10-block radius of New York, and we're paying to live in New York, and this is just there's no point to this. So we decided to bid farewell to New York and the dream and head out and change it. At that point, we were working from home in our little design firm in Brooklyn, like cookie cutter dream. So we moved to Austin, and in the transition, kind of all of the client work wrapped up. We are terrible, absolutely terrible at making cold calls and getting new clients. Word of mouth, wonderful. But with the recession, pretty much every client was saying, you know what? I can hold off on that website, on that new logo, on that brochure. Let's see what's happening with everything else, and then we'll engage on more design. So we were like, okay. So we've got a new mortgage. We still trying to sell our little apartment in New York. We got to do something. And we started to focus a little bit more on our own creative projects. We wrote a book about portfolios and self-published that, and it was well received. We saw that we had an audience. We were still doing the brand new blog and about 6 other blogs because blogging is a lot of fun and it takes up a lot of time and keeps us busy. And about 10 years prior, we had had this idea of, what if we do a conference about branding or about design or, a little bit about everything? But a friend had mentioned, oh, you should get an insurance policy. And we're like, scary. Insurance policy, that sounds very intimidating, very grown up, not for us, shut down. But at this point, we're like, well, maybe this is the time to revisit this idea. And so we very sensibly maxed out all of our credit cards, used up our life savings, which wasn't much, really, but that's what started the brand new conference. It's not the business advice I give to everybody. I just put it out there as an option for somebody who has a stomach of steel and can handle it, because we hosted the conference through Eventbrite, which probably you've used. And you sell tickets, and they promise you the money the day after the event to make sure you don't scam everybody, which is great. But you see this money growing, and you are like, I need to buy tote bags, I need to order programs, I need to do all of these things. So that's where these came in. And after that, I still have those credit cards, have good credit history, I promise. Did not overspend, because I kept checking that balance of the tickets and then making purchases based on that. But it is not for the faint of heart. So the brand new conference started in 2010. This is what the first event looked like. We held it in New York. It was one day, about 450 people. We figured, let's start in New York, because all of our friends are still there, and if anything, they'll come and support us, and they'll call their friends and their friends and their friends. And the event sold out, and the feedback was very, very positive. And so that gave us a lot of fuel to say, okay, let's do it again, and again, and again, and then make it an annual thing. So now I'm going to walk you through the evolution of all of these, because we are in a very unique position. We're branding for branding designers who are seeking inspiration, who are seeking a day or two of change, of motivation. So big pressure to design for designers, to brand for branding designers, and then to kind of start to push those boundaries and question what we can give them. But we know for a fact from the very beginning, we can be a little bit more playful. We can break the rules of design. We can challenge legibility and things like that. The first year, we focused a lot on typography. This was by Typotech. And you will see that typography is something that we resort to a lot. But this was interesting. We introduced a color palette that was a little quirky. And we've obsessed over little things like those, the C and the O there, creating this. And then we produced materials like every other freaking conference we've ever attended. There was the tote bag, there was the t-shirt, the program, the little sketchbook, and we thought we were oh so clever. This t-shirt is brand new. This tote bag is brand new. We were very, very timid this first year, and it made a lot of sense now that we can look back. We were very excited, don't get me wrong. The next year, we went to San Francisco. We got a little bit bolder and a little bit more confident. using the vernacular of the city and all of these sign paints that we saw in a lot of shops. We thought, okay, let's pull from that. Let's find something that identifies the city and the design of that city a little bit more so that we can start to have a little bit more game. So we collected some samples. We made a list of all of the things that we wanted to include and that we needed, and we hired a San Francisco-based sign paint designer and sent him all of these. And it was a bit of a mess because he kept sending us these giant rolls, like the size that they have at the supermarket. And the paint hadn't fully dried. Some of them were sticking to each other. So there was a lot of Photoshop cleaning of these files. But we needed pricing for the tickets. We needed names for all of the speakers. And all of the parts of the website, and eventually all of the printed material as well. So there was a lot of back and forth in the mail with these giant rolls. In order to introduce a little bit of that window quality, we started using vellum for some of these materials. And then we found these clear plastic bags that even had a bit of a texture like glass. And we decided to use the retail price of what it cost to make all of these materials as kind of the highlight for each item. So the bag was $245. The t-shirt, which ended up actually coinciding with the area code, was for $15, and so on and so forth. For our third year, we went back to New York. And this was a moment where, because of Brand New in the blog, we're very aware of the trends that are happening. And it was a moment where simplicity was not the name of the game. It was all pretty much maximalist design. There was a lot of patterns, a lot of color, a lot of variants of, this is my logo, but there's 16 different presentations of my logo. And so we decided to kind of jump on that bandwagon and start with some quirky typography once more, that we then segmented into some grids and started to play with what if we use those grids and create patterns within the letters and add some funky contrasting colors, and then start to spell it all out, because why not? Why say BNConf when you can say Brand New Conference New York, because you have all of these funky letters. And then we're like, you know what? Let's add another layer of complexity to this. What if we fill it with all the logos that are rebranding or doing something this year? But we realized, we were going to get a very, very stern letter if we started using certain apples in our materials. So we decided to just take the leaf, play dumb, and create a pattern. Take the arrow and make a pattern, and the bow, and so on and so forth, and get all of these patterns out of that. So if we go back to this grid, we add those patterns, and that's what it looked like. Kind of a monotone, tone-on-tone thing. The website was a sight, without a doubt. It was a little jarring. And, you could argue all kinds of things about how that is wrong, but in this case, because we're pushing the boundaries of designers and we're having them have a conversation about color in a way, we're okay with that. But we toned it down on some of the print materials. This was the program. It was an oversized 11 by 17, beautiful program with blind emboss and foil stamp and all of these beautiful things and stitch. But we did learn a little too late that when you're in the audience in a small theater and like this giant program is a really bad idea. But you don't know those things necessarily. And it's beautiful and it's a collector's item, but we never made a program that big again, and never will we. Kind of same thing with this poster. In order to get all that texture out of it, it needed to be a really heavy stock. And so the rolls that it came in were fairly big. And so you had this giant program and this giant roll as part of the things that you got at the conference. Not very practical. But we do learn, little by little. But it's beautiful. All right, for our fourth year, this is a year where there's a bit of a shift, okay? There was another trend going on, these X's. You could see them in coffee shops, you could see them in clothing, in retail, all kinds of stuff. Everywhere you had these X's that defined parts of a logo. So we were like, okay, we're gonna jump on that. We're gonna create our own grid, And then we're going to spell BNC for brand new conference, 13 for the year, in different ways. Now, it's really funky. Obviously, it doesn't look like all of those little icons with their buttons and things like that, but it's building from that trend. But since you have 4 different logos, how can you make them even more different from each other? These are the programs. Now, you can see that the logo kind of moves around. If you look at it closer, we had these wraparound black covers that we had cut these little black little holes from, and the logo is actually embroidered. So at this point, we had moved to a bigger theater, and we had 800 people. And I discovered this year Mumford & Sons. Mumford & Sons has the perfect tempo for music for any kind of production. I highly recommend it. Put those headphones on. I can go for hours. So the logo moves around, and the very first one took me about 4 minutes to do. By the time I was nearing these, I was doing them in under 2 minutes. And that's something important simply because whenever we realize we're going to commit to an idea, we know that we have to streamline the process throughout, and it keeps evolving until we really nail how we're going to produce this. And so usually it means putting kids to sleep, putting on my headphones, and knocking some of these out for 2, 3, 4 hours. For the podium, we jumped on the same idea, but capitalizing on our accent color, the yellow, and then using paracord to create that same effect on pegboard from Home Depot. Now, beautiful, simple, white paper bag for our materials. So screened with black, very, very basic. But this is the year where I was like, you know what, there's a little detail that I want. Yellow handles. Obviously, nowhere on the internet, and I can scour the internet far and deep, did I find white bags with yellow handles. So I did the only sensible thing one can do, make yellow handles. I hand dipped in a gallon of paint all of the handles and introduced the conference to my neighbors. This is our backyard. This was the first year where we took over our backyard, and our neighbors walking the dogs would be like, "Are you okay? What's happening? Like, I don't understand." And we would explain. And as the years went by, they would start to see these things and be like, "Oh, it's conference season again, huh? You want me to send pizza, or do you want to send the kids over? Should I send my teenager? How backed up are you?" And it became a neighborhood thing, because usually it was July in Texas, and we were out there sweating it out, doing some kind of big production. But this was the year that kind of shifted us into this handmade production side of the conference. And the reception was very good, and people really appreciated that, because we wanted to be sustainable. We wanted to create sustainable materials, but not necessarily in the traditional approach of saying, okay, what is the recycled paper? What are the best and most ecological inks? No, instead of that, instead of giving you materials that are produced with these sustainable materials that you're going to end up putting in the trash, either at the conference venue, at the hotel, or as soon as you get home, I want to create materials that you want to treasure, that you want to keep in your bookshelf, that you want to collect and have at your home or in your office for several years, if not a decade or two. So that's how we started to approach this, shifting that paradigm and creating materials like embroidered program. It's a lot harder and emotionally to put this embroidered program in the trash can that you know, and I told you I did it myself, and you see the appreciation for it than any other program that doesn't really matter or doesn't have that heart. A year later, we went to Chicago, and this was a big growth moment for us. Our attendees were saying, you know what, it's really hard to get funding or the days to go to a conference, a one-day conference, when there's travel on both ends. If you made it 2 days, it would be a lot easier. And so we were like, okay, we hear you. Let's make it 2 days. Now, if, I don't remember how much it cost at that point, but let's say it was $400, somewhere around there. Instead of saying, okay, it's going to be 2 days, it's going to be $800, which we did not feel was fair to our audience. We said, okay, it's going to be $450, but now we're going to have a bigger theater for 1,000 people, and you all better show up, because otherwise I'm in trouble. And that worked, because we didn't just take advantage of the fact that, okay, our expenses are doubling, so we should double the ticket price. No, we wanted to see a growth in the audience in order to cover that expense, because individually, it didn't make sense to just duplicate the price. So we went to Chicago and got a little nerdy, because we started the identity for this year with using Susan Carey's Chicago typeface that she did for Apple, and also banking a little bit on Chicago the musical and the stock exchange, and these squiggles that were happening in a lot of design applications at the moment. And we started to build a system with all of these different elements. So trying to bring in that stock exchange feeling. Starting to add some color, some texture here. What happens if you turn it all into these colors from the musical and give it some life through animation? And we made these custom fabric tote bags. So every year we usually try to have one extra special item, and in future ones I'm going to focus especially on some of these instead of trying to show you the breadth of all of the materials, because we keep adding and adding and adding, because we get more excited each year and we can't stop ourselves. But this was a way we're saying, okay, we're going to splurge on this bag and just bring this fabric to life. For the program, we went back to that foil, clear foil that we had used in the past to create the pattern. And these stickers that the volunteers placed on the programs the day before the conference, so that they would match the pattern, but they would move in different positions, so that when you're talking to somebody next to you in the audience, you suddenly realize everybody's is a little bit different. And for the badges, we started to get even more involved. One thing I love about hand making the badges is that I go seeing the names, and I start to recognize and sort of memorize the names of the attendees over the years, and I can be like, wait, I finished the W's and this person isn't here, and they've been with us for several years in a row. And I can send them an email and say, hey, what's going on? You haven't signed up this year. We're almost there. And they're like, you know what, I have a new job and I can't come this year, or had a baby, whatever is happening. But I can tell when somebody's been there for several years and suddenly they're missing, or little things like that, or they've invited their partner or their spouse, things like that. So I have a more personal connection with all of the attendees. The production of these was a little intense. This is our kitchen counter back in Austin. And you can see there in the middle that in order to keep the ribbons from fraying, I was using tea light, burning each end of every little ribbon. I don't like traditional lanyards. I find them clunky and ugly. And so whenever I can, I avoid them and use custom things. I now have a tool that cuts the ribbon and burns the edge at the same time. But back then, I was ignorant about that tool. All right, moving on to year 6. We go to New York. And this is where we go from, you guys are a little insane, to, you guys are like, you've lost it. And we don't know how you do it, but we're here for it. We took inspiration from graffiti. Not only the graffiti, the artistic graffiti from the local people, but also the graffiti that you find on boards on construction sites that say, post no bills, no trespassing, that kind of thing. We start to create stencils and start to play with actual spray paint. We also take into account the other New York, the 1%, the Upper West Side. And so we try to combine the gold foil, the beautiful typography, and the rough spray paint. Of course, we always start with a website. We usually introduce a website around May, and then figure out how we're going to translate that into the physical world over the summer and the conferences in the fall. So we start developing all of the names of all of the presenters and all of the different things that we're going to need for the website, and eventually the program and all of those things. This is a comp for the program. Now, in your heads, based on the design work that you've done here at school, you're like, okay, you cut out your stencil, you spray paint it, you scan it, you put it in your InDesign file, you send it to the printer, and it sends back 1,000 of them. And we're like, yeah, that's not gonna happen. We're gonna spray paint each one, because the texture that you get from spray paint is not something that the printer can replicate. So we're going to go ahead and make 4 different color papers, 4 different logos, all with black spray paint. Again, July, Texas, mask, 12 hours. Not the way I recommend doing things, but that's the way we roll. And eventually, we sent all of these finished papers to the printer and had first the foil stamp put on and then the covers put on the programs. But here's a secret. For that foil stamp to work, every cover had to be covered with Tresemme hairspray. No other hairspray would work, only Tresemme. So if you ever need something to stick, try that. And this is what the programs ended up looking like. And we did tell our audience at that point that if anybody found a bug stuck to their spray paint to let us know, and they would get a free ticket the next year. Nobody claimed it, so I'm really proud of that. Now, those handles. Remember those yellow handles? This is where it starts to get a little crazier. All of these bags had a horrendous, glossy, highly textured ribbon, and I did not like it. And I was using these neon spray paints. So I took out all of the ribbons and replaced them all with neon paracord. And so look at how beautiful they look now. Everything matches and nothing is glossy or entirely off the shelf. And we also spray painted each bag. That required a whole system of putting the bag in a piece of cardboard inside the bag so that the back wouldn't stain. And then we wanted to bring that scaffolding woodwork with spray to the name badges. So we made these larger pieces with stencils. We spray painted those. And I consulted with a carpenter and I said, you know, I need you to cut this big piece into these small pieces, and in the end, I'm going to need 1,200. He's like, yeah, sure, no problem. I can have those in 2 weeks, $3,000. $3,000 for cutting little pieces of wood? That's really bad use of my money. So instead, I went to Home Depot, spent $300 on a machine, learned how to use it, and I've used that machine pretty much every single year since then. I wasn't going to spend that amount of money. And everybody seemed to enjoy those, as you can see by the social media. This is a year where our audience really started to go crazy on Instagram with all of the things that were coming and that they were receiving. And we've never advertised the conference outside of our own blog or our own platform, and this is how word has spread. And we also started to spray paint pretty much every surface that we could spray paint, because why not, right? So for every day, we had a different podium wrap and all of the catering, which leads to moving to Nashville. Now, up until now, you've seen a lot of New York and Chicago, San Francisco. This was the year where we decided to kind of test our audience and be like, okay, I know getting to New York is really easy. Will more of you travel to a sort of destination city for the conference? And we had about 92% of the audience travel to Nashville, which was very rewarding and allowed us to explore a very different kind of visual interpretation to the conference. So as you know, Nashville, music, country, lots of embroidery, lots of really cool costumes. Also, hatro print, lots of letterpress, and wood type, really fun. And so we started to develop these patterns in Illustrator, build a different pattern for each of these letters. And these letters were so chunky and delicious. It gave us so much area to work with, so much surface. Now against black, ooh, that starts to become, you know, where you lose the edge of the type, but the pattern really pops and creates that. How can we bring that into the physical world? Well, this stage was particularly tricky because it didn't have walls. It was kind of like the symphony in Nashville, and it was an elevated platform, an open space everywhere. So I created these letters that are about 5 feet tall each. Started by routing them, creating those shapes, painting them black, and then really went old school. A lot of the things that we do, this is how I grew up transferring large pieces into other surfaces, and so I just keep going that way. Is there a better method? By now, maybe, Maybe I could have a high-end projector and do that, but I just go old school wherever I know. And hand painted. Now, in order for those colors to really pop, everything had to be hand painted 2 layers. So it took a long time. This is our kitchen counter. You can see there, like literally, that's the stove. The Lego box that got confiscated by me because it was the right angle. And a lot of days it was either, depending on how close we were to the conference, it's like, is it dinner? Is it letter? Is it both? Can we handle both? And again, it's a lot of cooking dinner, getting kids to sleep. Now they're teenagers, but at this point they were still little. And then working for 2-4 hours each night, creating all of these letters. I did discover that the back of a pencil, that eraser size, was the perfect little dot to create rhinestones. And this became our bedroom. And this is just an example of how the conference overruns our household. Each passing week, it just gets more and more and more corners and more crannies and more space gets overtaken by either giant letters or boxes or piles and piles of stuff. And we also played a lot with little LED Christmas lights in order to create this rhinestone movement on the stage itself. So there you can see the back wiring. But they really came to life. And it happened a couple times before, but this was the year where it got more intense, where the audience asked for those letters. They were like, we need a raffle. And so there was a huge raffle, and you can see people going down the street in between the bars in Nashville with their giant Fs that they're taking home. And that's so rewarding, because not even that is going to waste. I have pictures of the letters from the conference and stage design that we've done in offices, in kids' bedrooms, in households all over the place, and everybody's really excited whenever they win the raffle and get to take something home. For the badges, we wanted to continue this music industry inspiration. And so we were like, okay, can we print on records? I mean, it has a texture which is very annoying when you're trying to print on it. But Industry Print Shop, a silk screener in Austin, took on the challenge, and they found an ink that would work. It was a little stinky, and so they had to work with all of their doors open, which they did not appreciate that August in particular, but they put up with us. And so we bought a bunch of records that we tried to choose. Didn't matter to anybody. Nobody would be thinking that we're committing crimes against the music industry. Created our files on Illustrator, started printing them, and then came the job of cutting them down. You had to score them about 3 times per line. Then everything needed to be snapped. Those are like high don't cut yourself gloves that Armin likes to wear because his fingers get scraped. And then realizing that you have the perfect partnership when you can move very quickly, just jamming your hand and hoping it's not going to get drilled as you try to get all of these little holes done. You don't even see. That's fine. But look at the badges. Again, we love to use color whenever possible, and sometimes we're giving you 4 different logos. This time it's all about 4 different colors and the patterns. Those are kind of the overall combinations. And then for the programs, we gave each letter its own kind of hero moment. We printed 6 different covers. The back was the full pattern. And then the day before, the volunteers who almost died that day did put 7 rhinestones on every single cover. As you can see. So that was a lot more labor intensive than we thought it would be, because the little rhinestone machines kept overheating. All right, we go back to Chicago in 2017, and this is a year when we're moving from Austin to Bloomington. And we don't know, first of all, we don't know yet where we're going to move when we start working on this. We don't know when we're going to move or how are we going to produce all of these materials. So we decide to rely a little bit more on vendors this particular year just because of the uncertainty. But this is our source of inspiration. Beautiful sculpture that creates all kinds of patterns and distortions. And we also look at the city of Chicago again, and these kind of arteries of the city. I think it's Clybourne, Milwaukee, Grand, Ogden and South Archer. And so use that and the blue from the flag. We choose a typeface, and I could go on half an hour for why we choose each typeface, but I'm trying to keep it simple. And start to work on the distortions. How can we make it, what happens if we move it vertically, horizontally, in a diagonal? Can we go concave? What happens? And we kind of settle on 4 basic distortions that we like. And we have these bags made. They're felted on the inside, great for computer. And super shiny, and so all of the volunteers were wearing black gloves for the whole thing, just to keep everything fingerprint free for as long as possible. And then for the badges, we wanted these duotone silk screened on food grade mylar. Every silk screener, even industry, said, nah, I'm not touching that. Those things are slippery, they're too small, duotone is a pain, we're not doing this. And so we kept trying to come up with other alternatives and solutions until we got our own little DIY silk screen kit in a box and gave it a shot. And we silk screened maybe about 3,000 because there was a lot of trial and error in the process. But in the end, we ended up exactly with what we wanted. And so, you know, we don't take no for an answer very easily. It's either or too expensive or I cannot do it. I find a way to do it because when I want something, I get it, usually. And I know that sounds very cocky, but it's just when we have a vision and we want to make it happen, we just chase it, chase it, chase it. A couple of times we have realized we're not going to reach what we want. But in this case, we did. And this is just a quick glance at the program, which opened in the middle, and you opened it like a mirror kind of thing. Thursday program was to one side, Friday program was to the other side. And what was really rewarding in the end was having everybody go down in the park, find the sculpture, and start taking pictures of their materials against the sculpture and distorting even more. There were some videos of them like putting it close to the sculpture and distorting it even more. All right, this one nearly broke me, but if I had to choose a favorite, it would probably be this one, going back to New York in 2018. And we settled on the idea, we knew what we wanted to do when we were driving home from Chicago, the previous conference. That Saturday after the conference is a very, very dangerous day for us because we're riding high, we're happy, the adrenaline is still in our bodies and we feel like we can do whatever we want and be able to do it all. And so we were driving back and we're like, what if we took the concrete jungle cliche of New York and turned it into something beautiful and started to look at all of the typography that's in the buildings, all of the recesses, and started to look at it from a modernized perspective. So started to find some typefaces because what we really wanted to do was make everything out of concrete. So I learned how to make silicone molds and started testing. Can we actually recess the letters? How thin can I do it? Do I need to put in a mesh in there to reinforce it? Do I not? What breaks? What doesn't break? I discovered that there's different kinds of concrete. Countertop concrete was the one that ended up working the best. So I had 2,000 pounds delivered to my house. And for the next 6 months, 6 days a week, for 3 hours every morning, this is what I did. Nonstop, badges, programs, shaking all of that concrete to get some of those bubbles out. And my pride and joy, these little cubes that every mold maker in the US told me, it's impossible to make a cube with recessed letters. And I was like, yeah, no. I found these acrylic little cubes, I put them on the laser, burned out the letters, then made these silicone molds. And yes, they were a little tricky to get out. You needed strong fingers to unhook all of it. But in the end, I ended up with all kinds of really cute paperweights. And the process was molding everything, leaving it all night long, coming back the next day, soaking those in water for 24 hours while the next batch was already starting to dry. Piles and piles and piles that would then pre-assembled. These are for the name badges, and the black is actually Silly Wink. I don't know if you've ever heard of this material. It's like a little sponge thing that I found at a Hobby Lobby one day. And then the programs. Now, finding what glue works, and this is a trick that I'm gonna give you, free of charge. Linoleum glue is really good for all sorts of materials and sources, and it doesn't dry up very quickly, but once it holds, it holds. And so these are all the programs. They're all a little uneven. The color shifts in the concrete because February cold is one color and June is a different color because the temperature and the humidity, all of these impact how it's going to cure, how quickly. And there's all of these imperfections. In order to get the bubbles out, you have to shake it, and I would pound all of these molds. But I wanted to keep some of that in there. I did not go for absolute perfection. I wanted that texture. I wanted those imperfections. So these are all the name badges. All of the ribbons, no funky lanyards. That ribbon is hiding in between a piece of cardboard and the Silly Wink so that there are no seams. And each one is a little bit different. And these are all the paper cubes that everybody got because I was told it was impossible. So I needed to prove that it wasn't. For our 10th anniversary, we wanted to get really uncomfortable. So far, every city that we've been to, we love that city. We have an emotional and visual connection with that city. Vegas is the exact opposite. It is everything that we are not. But it is visually rich, and as I said, it made us uncomfortable, and so that pushed our boundaries and our thinking to a different sphere. How do you bring this to a digital representation through the website, and how do you bring it into the physical materials? Anyone familiar with lenticular printing? You've probably seen one version or another of these in a postcard or little stickers that you had as a kid. And we decided that that was the way to bring that strip of lights to life in the physical world. So we sent Armin with a whole bunch of gargantuan lenses that we rented to shoot all of these signs overnight, over 2 nights, climbing to like the 4th floor of a parking lot in order to get as close as possible. And he's not a night owl. He is not at all. So he had a hard time staying awake and keeping motivated, but he came back with a lot of material. And so we started to play. What is the on? What is the off? How do we turn these images into moving moments on the website or on the printed materials? And we also had a good source, which was this historic look at all of the Vegas signs. And we started to see a pattern. There's all of these marquees that are quickly changed throughout, and they were both historical and still being used. Enter eBay. We found some marquee signs, a full set, which was impressive. And so we developed a typeface out of it. We scanned them all in, digitized them, all of that, and started to create these patterns with the animations. Because as I said, the first thing that we always develop is the website. When we showcase that in May, we announce the speakers, and so it's a big moment for us. And at the same time, because of the production involved, we started to we chose all of these patterns that we wanted for the lenticular. And so we had these stickers made, which was the background and the letter. And we started to separate all of those because we wanted to mix these patterns. So developed a system of, okay, all of the backgrounds go here, all of the letters, all of the counters, all of these little cups, and yeah, as I say, every surface in our household starts to get covered by conference materials. It does not help that we have 4 dogs and 2 kids when you have all of these precious little buckets of things, and started to develop patterns and combinations. And then putting them onto the covers, finding a system to make things align, and putting in all the letters. And, again, it's hours upon hours upon hours. And the bottoms of your fingers get all scraped up from all of the stickers, but that's totally fine because in the end, according to our math whiz kid, we could have these many combinations of based on the images and the amount of covers that we were making. Obviously, we didn't get to that number anywhere close, but they really do come to life when you have them in your hand. And this is a little bit of what they look. So when you're surrounded by these, it is a little bit like being on the strip and having all of these lights engulfing you. For the badges, being much smaller, having the letters didn't make any sense. So we created kind of a tunnel version of smaller and smaller squares and combined those patterns. So these are some of the samples of the different patterns. And then the stage. I learned some electricity. I had some electric lessons that year. Again, trying to bring that neon feeling onto the stage, but at the same time, you don't want it to overpower what's happening on the presentations. And knowing that neon is not actually feasible, I found this flexible LED neon-like material and started playing with that and creating these letters out of acrylic because anything on the stage has to be non-flammable, so we have to be very conscious of that. And played with all of the colors, and in the end, we had these illuminated, and they would turn on and off slowly so that it wouldn't be so distracting. There we go. And then when the speakers went up, we toned them down a little bit, and then during the breaks, they came back to life. Of all the stages, that's probably my favorite. And again, all of those letters ended up in households or offices. Now, this is the last case study I'm going to show you, even though we've had one more conference. I just haven't had the time to put all of the materials together because it's time consuming. But after the interruption of the pandemic, we were struggling to come up with the idea for quite a while. And at some point, a friend of ours had posted the work of Sultan Jum, known as Gio. He's a kind of a nomad designer from living in Toronto, but he's originally from Kyrgyzstan. And so he creates these really funky distortions. He starts with a basic typeface and starts in Illustrator and After Effects, creating all of these weird distortions in a way, and stretches out the typography. And since we were going to Austin, there's the Keep Austin Weird stance that everybody knows. And so we wanted to kind of pull from that, and that in a way leads us to, well, what if it's ugly design? Like not in a traditional precious, beautiful design. Well, that's okay. Let's see where that takes us. And we started to give him, okay, from this work that we like, our sketches, like as you can see there, we're just pulling vector points randomly, but we're saying that's where your magic comes in. And this was the first year we really collaborated with somebody else, which was extremely rewarding, but also a learning curve for us. So we started with a really funky typeface and said, okay, you're going to typeset BMConf or the speaker's name in this typeface, and then do your magic. And we also took reference from the I Love You So Much mural that everybody seems to take a picture of whenever they visit Austin. It's on a coffee shop, partners. The owner's partner made it for her, wrote it down. And it's not the most beautiful mural by any means. The color combination is interesting, but it's just a staple of the city. So we latched onto that, and we started, okay, we've got our funky typeface, we're going to introduce a script, more beautiful than the one that's on the wall, but just with that reference, and let Gio go wild in creating all of these assets. And I'll show you a snippet, but he created assets for all different formats. And let me just grab some water. And all of the speakers. But how do you translate what's happening here into the physical world? Right? That's always the challenge for us. And so I went back to chemistry and figured if companies and retailers can make things out of silicone or rubber, I can do that too. So I started experimenting with different compounds and different brands and all kinds of things. And realizing, okay, that one's too transparent, this one breaks easily, this one is too dense, I can't do anything with this one gives me a lot of edging, till I finally found the one that worked, so I ordered more and a bigger bucket and did more experiments, and eventually there's a bigger bucket. And I got a simpler mold machine that allowed me to make these really thin molds out of a sheet of plastic. Heats up the plastic and then uses my vacuum cleaner to suck out the air, and all of a sudden, 45 seconds later, I have a mold, which allows me to make a lot of them, because when you want to make 1,200 of something, and you only have, say, 3 months, all of a sudden you're like, wait, I have to make 47 of these a day, or however many, for the programs. And then there's the badges, and then there's the other part. So we started to set up, and Arvin would be the one mixing the compound, which I didn't have a whole lot of time between making it and pouring it before it started to get really dense. So he would make little batches and put them in these giant syringes that I found. I did not use the tips, just the syringe. I think they're for horses. And start pouring them into the molds. And so we did this every single morning for about 2 hours. And every night we would take them out because they needed to cure about 16 hours. And there's a lot of counting in our office. And a lot of miscounting, because you get really confused very quickly. But overall, we try to keep track of how many we need to make, how many we've done, and we keep things in lasagnas. We make layers and layers because all of the counters are already used with stuff, so we have to keep piling things. But in the end, these are the programs, and these are the letters. And from this picture, it looks like the letters are actually printed. But in reality, they're made out of rubber. And they're just slightly sticky on the back that they adhere to the cover, but you can take them off, you can play with them, you can stretch them, and put them back on. And the same thing for all of the name badges. They were just little. And we attached those to little pieces of mint-colored card stock that we had printed and ordered rubber bands made in that same color so that the lanyard would stretch, just like the letters, just like the animations on the website. And guess what? I did not like those handles either, but that's no surprise. Because, I mean, they're blue against the mint, among other things, but the texture, it didn't feel right. So you've all probably seen those stretchy bands at physical therapy or at the gym. I found it in giant rolls. And so we cut little strips of handles. Now that thing was wobbly and it moved a lot, but we made a lot of handles. Now, if you've ever tied a whole bunch of balloons, I invite you to tie 4 knots for every bag for 1,200 bags. Make that. But they're a lot of fun. And the more things you put in them from the sponsors, the longer it got, and everybody was having a lot of fun at the event with our bags. And you would see them going up and down the stairs and having fun with it. So that sort of wraps up the case studies that I brought today. But I do want you to take home something of what I've learned or I've observed in doing all of these things over the years. And I want you to know that as a general rule, easy is bland. It really is. Because if it was easy to make all of these things, right? You can see there, like, all of those little tiny little lines is so that I can make the curves. But they are just slightly cut so that they don't come apart while I glue them. That gives me that. It takes a lot of work to figure it out and a lot of work to put it together, but it looks freaking awesome and it comes to life. These are just little videos that we did on our workshop before taking them to the venue to make sure everything was working. Easy is not fun, or little fun. I am not an avid shopper, but scouring online to find the matching outfits that match the brand is actually quite entertaining and time consuming, and I can call it work, which is, a good thing. Finding mint colored items in winter is impossible. I don't recommend it. And last year, I kind of took it up a notch. I found this craft colored paper dress, basically, on Banana Republic on sale. And so I got two, and I sent them to a costume designer at Indiana University, which is the university where I live. And she hand painted the dress in order to match all of the branding. So I have a green strap and a red strap, just like the bags, which also got new handles. I have been told that next year I cannot change handles. We'll see about that. All right, easy is, by all means, overrated, as you saw by that, and the changing of those handles, and the joy that they brought to everybody in the audience, even though those freaking little knots took forever and my hands hurt, and putting 2 inches of stretchy material through a 1/8 of an inch little hole with an ice pick took a long time and gave me carpal tunnel, doesn't matter. They looked awesome, and it was totally worth it. Because all of it matches. Sorry, I went one slide too far. Come on. Well, embracing the messiness and the chaos is essential. This is our household on any given conference. And that's Armin when we're about to load the last of the boxes into a moving truck that we had to get this year, because we realized at the last minute that the vans that we had lined up to drive up to Chicago, it's only a 4.5-hour drive. We were just taking it from our office, was not enough. We actually got a 17-foot moving truck that we put all of it in, and we're like, okay, Armin, good luck with the truck, I'm taking the van. Like, we're good. About half an hour into it, he's like, my legs don't fit, I'm cramping, I need to pull over. So I drove the moving truck to Chicago, and he drove the van. Still owes me for that one. And finally, choosing the not easy does mean hard work. We train them since they're young. You learn how to do it, you figure it out, and you find your way in the process. So it will be entirely up to you to decide if easy is for you to accept and embrace or to reject it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Bryony. Such a joy to get to see the behind the scenes of all your process. Are there any questions? Let's open up for questions. Go ahead. Yeah, Katie.
So with your very, very intensive process with these conferences, do you guys still take other work, or is this pretty much now your work and that the extra profit from these conferences is what fuels you being able to do it in the future?
So there's a deeper answer to that, and that is we used to do maybe 1 or 2 client projects a year up until the pandemic. When obviously the pandemic, we're all familiar with the process of what that entailed. As we came out of it, one of the big changes that we did was the blog. We ended up turning it into a subscription-based blog. So in doing that and feeling a bigger responsibility towards that audience, because now they're paying $20 a year. It's not much, but to us, that was a huge responsibility after having a free blog for 15 years. We took it up a notch on how much time we were investing on the blog. And so we started a podcast and other things. And so client work had to go down even more. And our focus at this point is 100% the design industry. Everything that we do, we are clear that yes, it's a business and we need to make money of it. But in the end, at the same time, we're not a corporation. We don't have a lot of overhead. We work out of our house. So we can keep our prices and our engagement with the design industry as low as possible because of that. Any other questions? Please. I love the questions.
Go
ahead.
Sorry. So you guys, when you're picking a city, what does kind of your ideation process look like since you take such inspiration from these places? Even though you've been there before, you've lived in New York and you've been these places how many times? Like the attention to detail is really cool with these like very niche core concepts, especially for the people that live there. Like, what does your process look like of getting started and picking these motifs that you continue throughout the conference?
So for example, this next one, it's in Salt Lake City. We've never been to Salt Lake City until we needed to, because finding the venue is the first thing. We will never host a conference in what I call a hotel dungeon or a convention center. Wherever you don't see the sight of the sun and you cannot tell if you're in one city or another, that's not for me. So we're always looking for special theaters, symphonies, operas, even though sometimes they're a little bigger than what we need or a little grander, at least it's a memorable experience and you get to go outside and you remember the big windows or the weird sculpture in the lobby or whatever. Then it's availability and affordability of the city that we're asking you to travel to. So for example, Boston is not a city that we will choose because hotels in Boston are $700 a night. So our conference is less than one night of hotel. That makes no sense. We found this beautiful venue in Salt Lake City. We had never been. So I went and scoured the venue, loved it. And then because of how schedule worked, in this case, only Armin went back for a 3-day scouting trip. He went to the historical archives, he went to the library, he went walking around, he took cheesy tours, like all of the things in order to get a better sense of the city. And so that's where we're getting that inspiration from, just doing a lot of research, and then all of that is supplemented by additional research online. So it's just immersing ourselves either on a cliche and trying to find a way to turn it around and turn it beautiful, like the concrete, or in this case, it's going to be very historically, with a very historic kind of source of information that's defining what the branding is going to look like. So yeah, it's just getting our feet in there and testing, trying things out. For example, for Nashville, our first idea was to literally embroider leather for the badges, for example. And we got a little embroidering machine and the software, and it was an absolute disaster. And it was horrible, and fabric was getting bunched up, and we couldn't figure it out, and eventually we're like, this is not it. We had to find a different way. But yeah, it's just getting deeper and deeper. Yeah.
So obviously, no is not an answer. And I love that. But there is that question, because you are doing such like niche production with very specific things that you can't just get. Where is your level of like, okay, this is worth it, this is not worth it, this is going to work, ooh, we need to go back. Like, how do you gauge like doing the concrete and all that stuff? Like,
at some point, I lose that line. I don't see it because I don't want to see it. No, but one of the main things is we will never grow the conference over 1,000 people. 1,050, fine. But overall, 1,000, I can do something 1,000 times. I cannot do it 2,000 times. So that's kind of the first line of this one we're not crossing. And then it really comes down to how much I love what the outcome is and how much sweat, blood, tears I'm willing to put myself through. But yeah, many times I see the line and I know I should respect it, but I choose not to. And it's not good. Not always good. Yeah.
Further on this theme of very labor-intensive production processes, and judging by the level of engagement that you're getting with your guests, your attendees, I wonder if you would consider, and since you've been told you're not allowed to change handles next year, what if you provided them the material and let them tie the 4 knots themselves? would that undermine the process? Would that be cheating, or is that okay?
No, I think that, given the right circumstances, that would be totally okay. Yes. I would be open to that with the right concept. Go ahead.
So with being obviously like your own business and working from home with your husband, how do you overcome art block and that like demotivation part of the process of like, especially when you're doing, 1,000 things of concrete, like I don't want to do this anymore. I'm surrounded by it 24/7 in my home with, your spouse in your, living space, like it's everywhere. Like, how do you overcome that kind of like art block process? Or do you just not get it?
In a way, we don't get it, but for a couple of reasons. One, we focus a lot on the end goal or the end. What does that look like? That looks like people enjoying the materials, people talking about them, taking them home, sharing them. So that's where I'm looking. I'm not looking at every single day-to-day kind of thing. And we have become extremely disciplined. So for example, the concrete thing, every day I would do my workout and literally use in my workout clothes, just go straight into that. And my breakfast was waiting after it. So I wouldn't have breakfast until I had done these two things. So that it just becomes your routine. And if you don't deviate from it, on Sundays, which was the day I didn't cast, it was the day I washed everything for the next week. So there was still that routine, there was still that involvement. And so it's just, I find the right time. Is it bedtime? Is it in the morning? Is it when? And just, that's what I'm gonna do. And I've got sniffles today, too bad. This is what you're gonna do because that chart says that today you have to make 57 of them. And if you don't, then tomorrow you have to add 10 more for the next week to every single day, and that's another half hour, and that's worse. So yeah. Any other questions? Business side, creative side?
So it seems like just from some of the photos of the studio, you have a lot of specialized tools. Like, do you have your own laser cutter? Like, just how much have you accumulated over the years? And like, do you have this? Like, can you make anything at this point because you just have so many tools?
They're not tools, they're toys. Or at least that's the way I like to label them. With the move from Austin to Bloomington, we gained a typical Midwest sort of finished basement. So I have 600 square feet of workshop space. And I have used every inch of that to the max. And just like that, the cutting of the wood, I bought that one year out of need, and I use it every single year now. We have accumulated a few things. The laser, for example, we had used a laser place in Austin several times, and we moved, and then one day they called us and they're like, we're switching equipment. We have somebody who is actually, one of our employees who is actually going to Indiana to visit family. Do you want our old machine for like $4,000? And we're like, ooh, new toy. And usually we spend about $3,000 each year on laser cutting materials. So it made a lot of sense. So we acquired the laser cutter that way. And so a lot of it is trying to balance out, well, if I buy the tool, is that cheaper in the long run than having it outsourced? And usually it is. And then I can use it over and over again. And I get to laugh twice. The next time I have to move, I have no idea what we're doing. I don't want to do that. Any other questions?
At these conferences, you had mentioned early in the lecture that you guys had some very big names very early on. Well, I guess very not early on for your business, but for the conference, it was one of the first few years. How did you go about accumulating such high level of clientele or repertoire to like be enticing these large names to a conference that, you said started very, very small, and you still will keep it at such a relatively small cap.
Yeah.
To have such an elite group of speakers.
So we started blogging 2002, a long time ago. And that helped us connect with a lot of the design industry. We were the first design blog to actually make a ripple. And so through other conferences and things that were happening at that point, we grew. When we started the brand new conference, the blog itself, if I remember correctly, was at 2 million page views a month. We had like 500,000 unique visitors each month. It was massive. Right now we have 30-something thousand subscribers, for example. So we have a very large platform, and at this point, it has become a staple of the industry. Back then, it was where everybody was connecting. And so we had that kind of backup. And the first year that we had the conference, we did rely on some of the bigger names in the industry, but we had interacted with them enough that they lended their names to us and kind of believed in us. As the years progressed, we have found that we can move away from the big names, and we now take the responsibility very keenly of, we have the platform to elevate new voices and put people on that stage that more mainstream conferences are not going to, because they feel they need the big name, because that's what ticket holders want. And our audience has shifted to a point where they look at the program and they're like, I don't recognize a single name of these speakers, but that's okay, because the last 3 times I've been there, I have loved 80% of it. I don't need you to love every single speaker. Not everybody's going to resonate with you, but I give a nice variety of small, medium, and large design firms and clients and experience. And last year we had a 24-year-old and a 76-year-old, and a whole range of people in between. So now we have that ability to kind of cherry pick different people. But we're also observing through the blog all of the design firms, who's doing what's happening. And when somebody, we'll see a lot of talent, for example, but it's still kind of green. And we're like, okay. 3 or 4 years later, we're like, would you like to be on the brand new conference? And we don't take pitches. We don't have people like saying, hey, I want to speak, can I do that? No. And we also don't put any content that's sponsor related. Anybody on that stage is cherry picked by us. We take that very seriously. But the design industry believed in us in the beginning, and so now it's our turn to elevate it.
So I feel like you all are going to make fun of me because I always bring this up, but documentation is so important, right? As you're doing all of this work, and I feel like not only are you documenting your process while you're doing all this behind the scenes, but you're also documenting the finished product. Can you just speak a little bit to how you think about documentation and like what is your approach to making sure you're getting great images that you can share?
So the first half hour of the conference itself is sharing the process. That has become a staple of those 2 days. So now it's a very structured process. We know what we need to include, what kind of mistakes and things like that we want to make sure are highlighted. And in the end, we probably share 10% of the coverage that we have. We have hours of video, we have thousands of pictures of process, but we have to obviously bring it down to about 30 minutes. But we just document everything and go organizing it. Like, okay, there's a folder for badges, there's a folder for cutting ribbons, there's a folder for blah, 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 and then sorting it out throughout. But yeah. And finding ways to streamline that. For example, for the rubber letters, when I was filling them with the syringes, at some point we wanted to capture that. And I made this box that had my phone in it that I tied with one of those stretchy bands but it kept falling, so I put a box of baking soda on the back, and that finally made it stay. And so there's obviously documentation of the documentation taking place, because this crazy lady has a baking soda box on her head. So yeah, it has escalated to that point. The first 4 conferences, there's barely any coverage, but we learned. And as people kept asking questions, we started to introduce that as part of the conference. And now everybody tells us that that's their favorite part. It's like getting all of the stuff and then seeing, oh my goodness. And then hugging it all for the next 2 days.
And then it looks so beautiful, and then the final images of the like super sexy, everything all lined up, lit beautifully.
Yeah, we do that after.
So satisfying to see that transformation.
So as we're making the final product, we start pulling, oh, this one's perfect. Okay, we keep about 16 of each for all of those photos afterwards, and except the name badges. Those usually, about 10% of the people don't show up, and so we just bring those back and use those for the photos, because the more you have, it looks the prettier. It takes forever to line up, but it does look really pretty.
Any other questions?
One more.
That last product documentation, do you guys do that in-house as well? Do you have like studio lights, or do you go somewhere?
No, we do it in our office. We close the door so the 4 dogs, trying to keep those out, and all of their fluffy hair that gets everywhere. Yeah, and we just have a couple of lights with some soft panels, and climb up and shoot as best as we can. That's it. We keep it simple.
Thank you so much, Bryony. All right, everyone, you all have one very important job, which is if there's any pizza left over, please take it home with you. I will see some of you tomorrow. Bryony will be joining us for our critique. And yeah, we'll see you all tomorrow, and have a great rest of your evening.